They laughed at him, his own children, because he still carried a worn little envelope in his back pocket, filled with clipped coupons from the Sunday paper. To them, it was silly, even embarrassing. To him, it was a quiet discipline, a way of life. And that's what brings us here tonight to Family Shadows, where the quiet sacrifices of fathers, often overlooked or ridiculed, reveal themselves as the strongest foundations of family. If you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever believed that love is measured in more than just money, then you are in the right place. I invite you to subscribe, to stay with us, because every story here is stitched from moments just like this one. This story is called, "They Laughed at My Grocery Coupons, so I showed them how real savings build a legacy." Now let us begin. William Carter was 60 years old when his children decided he was embarrassing. He hadn't meant to become that kind of father. The one people roll their eyes at, the one kids whisper about behind closed doors. He thought of himself as steady, predictable, dependable, words that in his younger years had felt like virtues. He had been the man who balanced the family checkbook with precision when his wife, Mary, was alive. He had been the man who kept the old Chevy truck running long past the point most people would have traded it in. He had been the man who carried quarters in his glove box so that after little league games there was always enough for ice cream cones, even when money was tight. Now, a widower for nearly a decade, William still lived by the same habits. He folded his shirts neatly, the way Mary had taught him. He rinsed and reused plastic containers that other people might have tossed without thought. And every Sunday morning, he spread out the coupons across his oak kitchen table, scissors in hand, cutting along the dotted lines with the same patience he once used to guide Daniel through fractions or to braid little Emily's hair before piano recitals. It wasn't just a habit, it was a ritual, a small prayer of gratitude and a practice of preparation. But to his children, it was a joke. The sting came one Thursday evening when the family gathered for dinner. The roast chicken sat steaming in the center of the table, the gravy boat beside it, the smell of rosemary and garlic drifting through the dining room. His granddaughter Lily, sweet Lily with her curious eyes, squirmed in her chair, waiting for the first slice of drumstick. Daniel, his 34-year-old son, leaned back with the smug air of a man convinced that success was measured in shiny watches and foreign cars. He smirked as he twirled his fork between his fingers. "Dad," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I saw you at the store yesterday. You still clipping coupons, really?" The words landed like pebbles on a pond, rippling through the room. Emily, now 30 and dressed in a blouse that looked more expensive than her budget should allow, giggled into her wine glass. "Oh, come on, Daniel. You know Dad loves his little papers." Daniel pressed on, emboldened. "It's like watching someone pay with Monopoly money. Do you realize how people must look at you? Coupons, Dad, that's so dated." Laughter followed, soft, cruel, thoughtless laughter, the kind that stings because it comes not from strangers but from the mouths of the very people you sacrificed for. Only Lily didn't laugh. She looked at her grandfather, her small hand slipping quietly under the table to squeeze his. William didn't answer. He folded his napkin slowly, set it on his lap, and offered a polite smile. He reached for the green beans as if nothing had been said. But inside, he felt the sharp ache of being diminished in front of those he loved most. Driving home in his old truck later that night, William replayed the moment in his mind, the smirk on Daniel's face, the way Emily's laughter had joined in. He gripped the wheel tighter. He remembered when Mary had been alive, how she would sit across from him at that same kitchen table with the same pile of coupons and laugh, not at him but with him, as they planned the week's meals. "Every dollar we save," she would whisper, touching his hand, "is a dollar we can give them for college or for their dreams." And they had Daniel's tuition, Emily's piano lessons, vacations to Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, and Cape Cod, all paid for by 1,000 tiny acts of restraint, by every coupon tucked into a pocket, every cent folded carefully into savings. Now those children sat grown and comfortable, mocking the very discipline that had lifted them. On Sunday morning, William rose early. The sun painted thin stripes through the blinds as he set out the paper on the oak kitchen table. The scissors clicked steadily, snip, snip, snip. A coupon for cereal, one for orange juice, another for flour. Each snip was a heartbeat, each fold a memory. He stacked them neatly and slipped them into the envelope, worn soft at the edges from years of use. On the front, in careful handwriting, Mary's script still read, "Household savings." He never changed it. He couldn't. It was a relic of her, as sacred as her wedding ring still resting in his drawer. Sliding the envelope into his back pocket, he thought, "Let them laugh. They don't see what I see. They don't understand what this builds." Later that afternoon, he took Lily to the grocery store. She skipped down the aisles beside him, sneakers squeaking against the linoleum, her braid bouncing as she hummed a tune. "Grandpa," she asked, tilting her head as he handed a coupon to the cashier, "why do you cut all these little papers?" He crouched down so his eyes met hers. Her gaze was pure, without mockery, just genuine curiosity. "Because, Lily," he said softly, "every little paper is a piece of tomorrow. A few cents here, a few cents there, one day it becomes something big, something lasting. Do you understand?" She nodded solemnly, though her child's mind couldn't yet grasp the depth of his words. Still, William smiled because he knew one day she would. That night, he placed the receipt on the counter and traced the line that read, "You saved $14.35 today." He didn't smile with pride. He smiled with quiet satisfaction, because to him those numbers weren't about groceries. They were about dignity, about discipline, about the kind of wealth that can't be laughed away. He sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, and whispered as if Mary were still across from him. "They think it's funny, hon. They think I'm old-fashioned." He touched the envelope in his pocket, feeling the soft bulge of coupons inside. "But we know the truth, don't we? We know what these really are." His eyes misted, and he looked toward the empty chair across from him, imagining her nodding gently in the way she always did. "They're not scraps of paper," he said quietly. "They're bricks, bricks of a legacy." The laughter did not end at that Thursday dinner. It lingered like an aftertaste William couldn't shake, showing up in small moments that should have been ordinary. A few days later at the supermarket, William stood in line with a basket of modest groceries. Bread, eggs, a small carton of milk. Lily held a box of animal crackers, hugging it like treasure. He pulled his envelope of coupons from his pocket, handing a few carefully folded slips to the cashier. Daniel happened to walk in just then, pushing a cart filled with name-brand cereal, bottled sparkling water, and a bouquet of flowers for his girlfriend. His eyes caught on the coupons in his father's hand, and he let out a groan. "Dad," he said, shaking his head as he approached. "Still with the coupons. For bread, milk, you save what, 50 cents, a dollar?" Lily shifted uncomfortably, looking from her father to her grandfather. "It adds up," William replied gently, sliding a dollar bill across the counter to cover what the coupons didn't. Daniel smirked, pulling his credit card from his wallet. "Adds up to what?" An extra cup of coffee. People probably think you're broke when you do that. The cashier, a young man with tattoos along his arm, glanced at William with a half smile, not unkind but pitying. William kept his face calm, his hands steady. "It's not about what people think," he said quietly as the cashier bagged his items. Daniel rolled his eyes. "Yeah, well, maybe one day you'll realize the world has moved on. Nobody does that anymore." That evening at Emily's apartment, the teasing continued. She had invited William over for dinner, pasta, salad. A bottle of wine, she admitted, had cost more than the groceries for an entire week when she was a child. "Dad," Emily said as she stirred the sauce, "Daniel told me he caught you using coupons at the store again." She laughed, shaking her head. "Honestly, I don't get it. You've got your pension, the house is paid off. Why are you still living like it's 1985? William sat at her kitchen table, his hands folded. He looked at his daughter, seeing not the little girl who once danced in Mary's kitchen, but a woman too eager to prove herself in a world that rewarded appearances more than patience. "I live the way your mother and I always lived," he answered softly. "We believed in making things last, in finding value even in small things." Emily poured the sauce into the pot, sighing. "But don't you want to enjoy life, Dad? I mean, who cares if cereal is $2 more? Just buy it. Be normal." "Normal," William repeated, almost to himself. He thought of how normal had always been defined differently for him and Mary. For them, normal was sitting side by side at the table, trimming away expenses to build something for their children's future. Normal was saving, not splurging. Normal was love measured in security, not in things. Later, after dinner, William helped Emily clear the plates. She leaned against the counter, her glass of wine half empty, and looked at him with a soft pity that pierced him more than Daniel's sharp words ever had. "Dad," she said quietly, "I just don't want people to think you're struggling. Daniel says it looks bad, like we're not taking care of you." William's hand stilled on the dish he was rinsing. "Not taking care of you," the phrase stung. He had spent decades doing the opposite, making sure they were taken care of. And now his own thrift was seen as weakness. He dried the dish, placed it on the rack, and said only, "I'll be fine, Emily. Don't worry about what people think." But when he left her apartment, walking down the narrow hallway, he carried the weight of her words with him. That weekend, William had agreed to meet an old colleague, Howard, for coffee. They had worked together in the accounting office back in the day, and though years had passed, their friendship remained. Howard spotted the envelope peeking from William's shirt pocket and chuckled. "Still clipping, eh?" William braced himself, but Howard only grinned. "I should have kept it up myself. You know what I waste on takeout every week? A fortune. My wife tells me I ought to learn from you." The relief was unexpected. For once, the teasing wasn't ridicule, it was admiration. William smiled, a genuine smile, and folded the envelope back into his pocket. But that relief was short-lived. At the next family gathering, hosted in Daniel's spacious home, the conversation circled back, as it often did, to money. Daniel bragged about his latest purchase. A sleek new SUV, all-leather interior touchscreen panel. Emily chimed in about her new phone, the upgraded camera she just had to have. "Dad," Daniel said, pouring himself another drink, "you should have seen the look on the cashier's face when you handed over those coupons. I swear he thought you were one of those old guys living on food stamps." The room filled with laughter again, Emily covering her mouth, even a cousin joining in. William's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. He sat there, the quiet figure at the edge of his own family, his dignity pressed between their jokes. Only Lily, sitting beside him, leaned closer and whispered, "I think it's smart, Grandpa." Her words were soft, but they reached deeper than all the laughter combined. William looked down at her, his heart tightening with both pride and sadness, because in that moment he realized that children see more than adults do. They see truth before the world teaches them to mock it. That night, back in his own kitchen, William set the day's coupons out on the table. The house was quiet, the air thick with memory. He could almost hear Mary's voice. "Ignore them, Will. Keep going. We know what this means." He clipped in silence, the scissors steady in his hand as though each cut was a refusal. Refusal to bend to ridicule. Refusal to abandon the discipline that had carried his family through decades. And though the laughter echoed in his ears, he whispered back into the empty room as if Mary were still there. "They don't see it yet, but one day they will." The scissors had always been part of his Sundays. The steady snip of steel on newsprint, the soft shuffle of paper as he stacked coupons into neat little piles. It was as ordinary to William as church bells in the morning or the smell of coffee at dawn. For him, it was more than saving pennies. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat that had carried him through life's storms. Long before Daniel and Emily were born, when he and Mary were newly married and scraping by on entry-level salaries, coupons had meant choice. $2 saved here, 3 there. It meant they could afford a carton of eggs and still buy a loaf of bread. It meant there was enough left at the end of the month for diapers. It meant dignity in a world where their paychecks stretched thin. He could still picture Mary, sitting across the table in that first cramped apartment, scissors in her hand, her auburn hair falling into her face as she clipped with care. She'd hold one up and grin, saying, "Look, Will, 25 cents off oatmeal. That's breakfast for the week." And he would laugh, not because it was funny, but because her optimism made every small saving feel like a victory. They had carried those habits into their life together, through the lean years and the better ones. Even when his accounting job grew steadier, even when promotions came, Mary never stopped clipping and William never stopped organizing. It wasn't about necessity anymore. It was about the lesson, the ritual, the belief that patience built security brick by brick. When the children were small, they had laughed too, but not cruelly. Back then, Daniel had clapped when his father showed him how much they saved on peanut butter. Emily had giggled when Mary let her paste coupons onto a piece of cardboard like art. "Every little bit helps," Mary used to say, her voice soft and sure. But now, years later, that same habit that had once fed them, clothed them, carried them, was the very thing that drew ridicule. One rainy afternoon, William sat in his workshop, the old boathouse by the lake that had once been his pride. He kept his tools lined neatly on the wall, the wood smelling faintly of cedar and varnish. A coffee tin sat on the workbench, labeled with Mary's handwriting, "Spare change." He tipped it over, letting the coins roll across the table. Nickels, dimes, quarters, each one catching the gray light from the window. He ran his hand through them, the clinking sound filling the silence. This too was a habit, collecting loose change, emptying his pockets at the end of the day. Another practice his children mocked. "Dad, you're hoarding pennies," Daniel had said once. "Just use a card like everyone else." But William smiled to himself as he looked at the little mountain of coins, because he knew what they represented. Not just money, but memory. Not just habit, but discipline. He thought of the years after Mary's passing when grief made every day heavy. It was the small routines, the clipping, the saving, the organizing that kept him tethered to life. Without them, he wasn't sure he would have managed. That evening, Lily came into the workshop, her raincoat dripping on the floor. "What are you doing, Grandpa?" she asked, wide-eyed, watching the coins shimmer. "Counting," he said simply. He scooped up a handful and let them fall through his fingers. "These little coins, most people wouldn't think much of them, but together they can build something bigger." She tilted her head, curious. "Like what?" "Like a bridge," William said softly, "between today and tomorrow. You see, Lily, the world teaches people to want things fast, but fast doesn't last. Slow, steady, those things build something no one can take away." She nodded, though her young mind still couldn't wrap itself fully around his words. But she smiled because she loved the sound of his voice when he taught her something, even if it was wrapped in mystery. That night, William opened an old photo album. He sat at the kitchen table, flipping through pages yellowed with time. There was Mary holding baby Daniel in her arms, her smile radiant. There was Emily at age 6, clutching a stuffed bear at Christmas, her eyes wide with joy. On the edge of one page, a coupon was tucked, slipped there long ago, 10 cents off laundry detergent. He remembered that week. They had stretched every cent, and Mary had tucked the coupon into the album as a reminder. "This is what built our home." He touched the brittle paper, tears pricking his eyes. "They don't remember," he whispered, "but I do." The next day, when Daniel stopped by, William offered him a cup of coffee. "You know," Daniel said, stirring cream into his mug, "you don't have to keep up these habits. You've done enough. Relax, live a little." William looked at his son, the suit jacket, the shiny watch, the restless energy. He thought of the boy who once clapped at saved pennies, and he wondered where that boy had gone. "Relaxing," William said gently, "doesn't always mean spending. Sometimes it means knowing you've built enough to last. And I have, Daniel, more than you know." Daniel frowned, puzzled, but let the matter drop. He didn't see the layers beneath his father's words. Not yet. In the quiet that followed, William returned to his scissors, his envelopes, his rituals. Because to him they weren't old habits. They were threads woven through decades of love, sacrifice, and perseverance. And though his children mocked him, though they saw only scraps of paper and jars of coins, William knew the truth. These habits were not weakness. They were the foundation of something greater than they could imagine. It happened at a family gathering. One of those weekends when everyone crowded into Daniel's new house, the one with the open floor plan and the leather couch that he never stopped bragging about. There was music playing softly in the background, glasses clinking, laughter echoing in every corner. William arrived with a plate of cookies he had baked that morning, carried carefully in a tin that had once belonged to Mary. No one noticed the tin. They noticed instead the envelope, peeking out from his back pocket, worn and frayed at the edges. "Dad," Daniel called from across the room, his voice already booming from the beer in his hand. "Did you bring your coupons with you tonight, too?" The room erupted in laughter before William could answer. Emily shook her head with a smile that was part amusement, part embarrassment. "He probably tried to get a discount on the gas to drive here," Daniel added, and more chuckles followed. William froze in the doorway, his cookies still in his hands, his dignity shrinking with every giggle. He felt like an outsider at his own family's table, a relic placed on display for amusement. He placed the tin on the counter quietly, without ceremony, and took a seat in the corner of the living room. He smiled politely when spoken to, nodded when someone passed him a plate, but inside his heart sank. As Daniel continued to boast about his new SUV and Emily showed photos of her latest shopping spree, William sat silently, watching them measure their worth in purchases and possessions. At one point, Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice but not enough to keep it private. "Dad, really, you should stop. People see you pulling out coupons and they think we don't take care of you. That you're poor. The word hung in the air like smoke. Poor. William's face stayed calm, but his hand tightened around his glass of water. He thought of the years when he had gone without new shoes so that Daniel could have cleats for baseball, the nights he had clipped coupons under the dim kitchen light while Mary mended Emily's school uniforms. Poor. He had given them everything he could, and yet here he sat, quietly accused of shame. The laughter started again when Daniel mimicked his father at the grocery store, pulling invisible scraps of paper from his pocket, handing them to an imaginary cashier. The cousins laughed. Emily laughed too, though softer, almost apologetically. Only Lily, perched on the edge of the couch beside her grandfather, didn't laugh. She leaned into him, whispering, "Don't listen to them, Grandpa. I like your coupons." Her small hand found his, squeezing tight as if to remind him that not everyone had forgotten. William looked down at her, his throat tightening. In her eyes he saw the reflection of something purer, something unspoiled by vanity or pride, and it gave him strength if only for that moment. When the evening ended, William helped stack the dirty dishes, moving quietly through the kitchen as conversations carried on around him. He placed the empty cookie tin back into his bag, unnoticed by anyone else, and slipped out into the night. The drive home was long and silent. Rain tapped against the windshield, the wipers squeaking as they cleared the glass. He thought of Mary, what she would say if she had been there tonight. He could almost hear her voice. "Hold your head high, Will. Let them laugh. They don't understand, but one day they will." The words steadied him, because deep down, William knew something his children did not. His quiet rituals, his mocked coupons were not signs of poverty. They were proof of foresight, proof of patience. Proof of a man who had always known how to build tomorrow out of today's small pieces. And though the laughter still rang in his ears, he whispered into the empty cab of his truck as if Mary could hear. "They don't see it yet, but I'll show them." The morning after that gathering, William sat once again at his oak kitchen table. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Outside, the world hurried by, cars rushing down the wet street, neighbors hustling to work. But here in this room, time seemed slower, steadier. He unfolded the Sunday paper, its ink smudging faintly against his fingertips, and spread it across the table. Scissors in hand, he began again. Snip, snip, snip. Each coupon fell neatly into the growing pile. Flour, coffee, laundry detergent. All ordinary items, nothing grand, yet each one carried meaning. To anyone else, they were scraps. To William, they were promises. Promises that he could still choose discipline over waste. Promises that he could honor the life he had built with Mary. Promises that he could pass something on even if his children refused to see it now. Lily sat at the table across from him, her chin propped in her hands, her eyes following the scissors with fascination. "Grandpa," she asked, "why do you always do this?" William paused, setting down the scissors. He looked at her, the one person in the family who hadn't joined the laughter. "Because, Lily," he said softly, "every little paper is a piece of tomorrow. A few cents here, a few cents there. It may not look like much, but together they can build something strong, something that lasts." She furrowed her brow, thinking hard, then smiled. "Like Legos," William chuckled. "Exactly like Legos. One by itself doesn't look like much. But if you keep adding them brick by brick, one day you look up and realize you've built something big, something beautiful." Her face lit with understanding in the simple way only a child's can. And William felt his heart ease. Perhaps even if his children no longer believed in his ways, there was still one person who would carry the lesson forward. That afternoon they went to the grocery store together. William pushed the cart slowly, his envelope tucked in his pocket. Lily skipped beside him, pointing at boxes of cereal and rows of fruit. At the checkout line, he pulled out a handful of coupons. Cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, scanned them one by one. Each beep was a note in a quiet song William had known all his life. When the total dropped by $12, William smiled faintly. He handed the receipt to Lily. "See here," he said, pointing. "You saved $12.06 today." Lily's eyes widened. "That's a lot." He leaned down, whispering, "It all adds up, sweetheart. That's the secret. Not all at once, but little by little." Later, at home, William tucked the receipt into a small wooden box he kept in his study. The box was filled with years of similar slips, evidence of savings, records of discipline. It wasn't something he ever showed Daniel or Emily. They would laugh, call it pointless. But William knew better. He knew that one day those slips would tell a story. A story not of stinginess, but of persistence. A story of how small choices, repeated over a lifetime, could build a foundation stronger than any boastful purchase. That evening, as the sun set over the lake behind his house, William stood on the porch with Lily. The water shimmered in the fading light, calm and endless. "Grandpa," she said suddenly, "do you ever feel sad when they laugh at you?" He looked at her, surprised by her tenderness. "Sometimes," he admitted. "It hurts because they don't see the whole picture. They see only the scraps of paper, not the wall those scraps are building." He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "But strength isn't always loud, Lily. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just keeping steady even when the world doesn't understand." She nodded, her small face serious, and he thought, she gets it more than they do, more than they want to. That night, alone again, William clipped a few more coupons before bed. His scissors moved slowly, deliberately. Each cut a reminder that resilience didn't need applause. His children could laugh. They could sneer. But he would continue, because his strength was not in proving them wrong at that moment. It was in holding fast patiently to the values he had carried all his life. And deep down, he knew, the day would come when those quiet choices would speak louder than all their laughter combined. The family gathered on a Saturday evening at Daniel's house once again. It had become a habit of theirs. Big dinners where wine flowed, voices overlapped, and stories were told louder than they needed to be. William arrived quietly, carrying his usual plate of food to share. He placed it on the table without fanfare and took his seat at the far end, the place where he wouldn't draw much attention. The conversation started the way it always did. Daniel boasting about his latest purchase, Emily scrolling through her phone to show pictures of her shopping spree, and the cousins trading stories about vacations they couldn't really afford. "Dad," Daniel said suddenly, smirking, "I hope you brought your coupons. Maybe you can help me get a deal on the wine next time." The laughter came again, rolling through the room like a wave. William forced a smile, but his hands tightened around his glass. He had been silent long enough. When the laughter died down, William set his glass gently on the table. His voice, though soft, carried across the room. "You think these coupons mean nothing," he began, his eyes moving between Daniel and Emily. "You think they make me small or foolish or stuck in the past, but let me tell you something." The room grew still. It wasn't often William spoke at length, and his calm tone drew more silence than any shout could. "For 30 years, he continued, your mother and I clipped coupons. We saved pennies, nickels, dimes. We chose second-hand clothes so you could have new ones. We drove old cars so you could go to college. Every little saving went somewhere. It built something, not just groceries, not just receipts, but a foundation. Emily shifted in her chair. Daniel smirked, though less confidently now. William reached into the worn leather bag he had brought and pulled out a folder. He placed it on the table, sliding it toward them. "Do you know what those coupons really bought?" he asked. Daniel frowned, flipping open the folder. Inside were crisp papers, neatly stacked, contracts, bank statements, legal documents. "This," William said, his voice steady, "is a purchase agreement for a piece of land by the lake, and on that land a house. A place your mother and I dreamed of long ago." The room fell into stunned silence. Emily leaned forward, her eyes wide. "Dad, you bought a house." "Not just a house," William corrected gently. "A retreat. A place for family, for Lily, for all of you. Every coupon, every coin, every little act you mocked, it went here. Brick by brick, cent by cent, it built this." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You laughed at scraps of paper, but those scraps built a legacy." Daniel's mouth opened, then closed again. For once he had no clever retort. His face flushed, and he shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Emily blinked rapidly, her eyes glistening as she looked from the papers to her father. "But Dad," she whispered, "how did you?" "Patience," William said simply, "and faith. Faith that small things matter. Faith that what seems foolish today becomes wisdom tomorrow." Lily clapped her hands, her face beaming. "Grandpa, can we see it? The house?" William's stern expression softened into a smile. "Yes, Lily, we'll go soon." He looked back at Daniel and Emily, his voice calm but firm. "You thought my habits made me weak. You thought they made me less. But strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a man sitting at a kitchen table with scissors and paper, choosing tomorrow over today. And now that tomorrow is here." The room was silent, the weight of revelation pressing into every corner. For years, William had endured their laughter. Now he had turned it into astonishment. And as he sat back in his chair, his folder of documents resting between them, the power in the room had shifted. The coupons were no longer scraps. They were proof. The papers sat heavy on the table, their sharp edges gleaming under the chandelier light. Daniel's fingers lingered over them as if he wasn't sure whether to pick them up or push them away. Emily leaned closer, her breath caught in her throat. For years they had laughed at their father's thrift. For years they had mistaken his silence for weakness. But now here was proof stacked neatly in front of them, more solid than any argument, louder than any defense. William folded his hands in his lap and let the silence stretch. He had learned long ago that silence was a teacher. If you let it, it forced people to sit with the truth. Finally, Emily spoke. Her voice trembled. "So you really bought it, a house, by the lake?" William nodded once. "Your mother and I dreamed of it back when you were children. We couldn't afford it then, but we believed in saving. We believed that if we were patient, if we gave up a little today, we could give something greater tomorrow. That dream never left me, and now it's real." Daniel's jaw tightened. He tried to recover, tried to summon the swagger that always carried him. "So what? You've got a place by the lake. Nice surprise, Dad. What are you planning to do with it? Sell it? Split the money?" His words were sharp, the tone calculated to reassert control. But William didn't flinch. His gaze was steady, calm. "No," he said simply. "I didn't buy it to sell, and I didn't buy it to split." Emily blinked. "Then what?" William reached back into his leather bag, pulling out another envelope. This one was newer, less worn, and marked with clean lettering, "The Carter Family Trust." He set it down beside the purchase agreement. "This house," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "isn't just property, it's a trust. A legacy, it doesn't belong to Daniel. It doesn't belong to Emily. It belongs to the family, and it will stand as long as you treat it with respect. The words fell like stones into the room. A trust, Daniel echoed, his brow furrowing. What do you mean? William unfolded the papers, sliding them forward. I've placed the property into a trust in your mother's name. It cannot be sold for profit. It cannot be used as leverage for loans or quick cash. It will remain in the family generation after generation, a place for your children and their children, a reminder of what patience builds. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Dad, you did this all by yourself. William's voice softened. Not by myself. Your mother began it with me. Every coupon she clipped, every penny she saved, it was her hand beside mine. She's gone, but this is still hers too. And now it's yours, but not to spend, to cherish. He paused, looking at Lily, who was wide-eyed with wonder. One day Lily will bring her children there, and when she does, I want her to remember this moment, that it was built not from pride, not from greed, but from the smallest acts of care. Daniel leaned back, his face unreadable. The swagger was gone now. In its place was something unfamiliar, maybe guilt, maybe shame. So all those years, he muttered, were saving for this. William nodded. Yes. While you laughed, I was building, quietly, patiently, because wealth isn't always about what you show, it's about what you preserve, and legacies, they aren't bought in a day, they're built across decades. The room was silent, even the clink of cutlery had stopped. William looked at his children one by one, his voice low but certain. You thought my coupons were scraps, you thought my jars of change were silly, but those were bricks. Bricks of a home, bricks of a trust, bricks of a legacy. And now, while you measure wealth by what you spend, I will measure it by what I've left behind. He leaned back, letting his words settle into their hearts. This is your inheritance, not money to burn, not cash to waste, but a place to gather, a place to remember, a place to honor where you came from. Emily wiped her eyes, whispering, Mom would be so proud. William's lips curved into the faintest smile. She is. I feel her in every corner of this decision, and I hope one day you'll feel her too. He glanced toward Lily, whose small hands pressed the folder closed as if to guard it. This house, William said finally, isn't just mine. It's not even yours, it's ours, forever. The lake shimmered beneath the morning sun, a wide stretch of blue that seemed to hold its breath in reverence. The house stood at its edge, modest yet sturdy, its cedar siding glowing warmly as if it had been waiting all these years for this very day. William parked the old Chevy at the gravel path and stepped out, his shoes crunching softly against the stones. Emily followed behind him, her hand resting gently on Lily's shoulder. Daniel came last, his steps slower than usual, his eyes darting between the water and the cabin as though he couldn't quite decide how to feel. This is it, William said quietly. Your mother and I dreamed of this place. We thought of mornings like this, with the mist rising off the lake and the smell of pine in the air. We wanted a place where you could always come home. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. The scent of fresh wood greeted them. Sunlight spilled through the windows, laying golden patches on the floorboards. The rooms were simple, a kitchen with sturdy counters, a living room with a stone fireplace, 2 bedrooms with quilts folded neatly on the beds. But simplicity was the point. It was not a house built to impress. It was a house built to hold memories. Lily raced from room to room, her laughter echoing like bells. Grandpa, look, there's even a porch and a swing. She darted outside, her braid flying behind her as she climbed onto the swing, pumping her legs until the ropes creaked. Emily walked slowly through the kitchen, her fingers brushing across the counters. Her eyes glistened and she whispered almost to herself, Mom would have loved this. William nodded. She does. She's here. In the beams, in the boards, in the quiet. She's in every choice that brought us to this moment. Daniel stood in the doorway, silent. The usual bravado on his face was gone, replaced by something softer. He cleared his throat. I didn't get it before, he admitted, his voice low. I thought you were just stuck in the past. I thought you were small, but you were building this all along. William looked at him, his eyes steady but kind. You measure wealth by what you spend, Daniel. I measure it by what remains when you're gone. And when I'm gone, this will remain. For you, for Emily, for Lily, for the children that come after her. That's what your mother and I wanted. Not money to vanish in a weekend, but a place to gather, a place that will outlast us. Daniel swallowed hard, his gaze drifting to the water. For the first time in years, he had no laughter left. They gathered on the porch as the sun began to dip, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. Lily curled up beside her grandfather, resting her head on his arm. "Grandpa," she said softly, "this feels like home." William kissed the top of her head. "That's because it is, sweetheart, always will be." He looked out over the lake, the water catching the last of the light. His voice carried not just to his family, but to the memory of Mary, to the generations yet to come, and perhaps to anyone who had ever doubted the strength of small, steady acts. "Legacy," he said, "isn't built on noise. It's built on patience, on choices so small they look invisible, on love that doesn't need applause. That's what endures, that's what remains." The family sat in silence, watching the sun sink lower, each lost in thought. For the first time in a long while, the laughter that filled the air was gentle, not mocking. It was the laughter of belonging, of shared recognition, of hope. And William knew. The coupons, the jars of coins, the discipline mocked and misunderstood, none of it had been wasted. It had become this, a house by the lake, a trust in his wife's name, a promise that the family would always have a place to return. The laughter had turned into understanding, and the scraps of paper had turned into bricks of a legacy. Thank you, dear friends, for listening to this story on Family Shadows. May it remind us all that true wealth is not found in what we show off, but in what we quietly build for those we love. From our family to yours, we wish you health, peace, and happiness with your loved ones. Hold them close, honor their sacrifices, and never underestimate the power of patience. Until next time, thank you for watching, and may your home always be filled with love.